All right, everybody, thanks for coming today. We'll get the meeting started here. And it looks like there's 3 folks in for public comments. I don't know what order that.
Yeah, I can call us up. We have 3 public comments so far, 1 for each of our agenda items that we have in the normal working meeting. So we'll start off, I believe this is Tim with Ben Yimby. Sorry, the handwriting is a little.
Oh, Ian.
Ian, sorry, that's my bad.
Yeah, no worries. No, my handwriting is awful. No, you're right.
So we have 2 minutes for public comment. There's a clock up here that you can tell the time. Yellow is when you have 30 seconds left.
Gotcha. Okay.
So you can measure it that way, but as noted, this is for the neighborhood commercial agenda item that we're going to be discussing in a bit. Take it away, Ian.
Yes. Hello, Chair and BDAB committee. I just want to offer my own perspective on this. I'm here as a lead of Ben Gimby to support the idea of opening up our neighborhood to more commercial opportunities. As a housing and livability advocate, I believe that giving our residents resources close to where they live make their neighborhood more vibrant. I live in the Midtown neighborhood close to my gym, my pharmacy, the Midtown Yacht Club, and Bruno's, a small corner store and pizza shop. Living close to these amenities has had a meaningful impact on my life. My partner and I decided to share one car since it's easy for us to get to most of our needs in a short bike or walk. This has significantly reduced our monthly bills and our reliance on our car. The short trips to Bruno's prompts us to walk there most weeks if we're looking for a snack or a drink, and we often run into our neighbors doing the same. One day, my partner and I were making key lime pie, and I realized that I had forgotten to get graham crackers. I run down to the street to Bruno's to buy crackers and thank the owner, Eric, who knows my name by this point. We are so thankful to have exactly what we needed, so we brought Eric a slice of key lime pie later that evening. The next day, we walk in to buy drinks, and he says he loved the key lime pie so much that he gives us a few slices of pizza, and he says, and I quote, he's happy to trade pie for pie. All in all, it's a pretty regular and mundane interaction, but this is just one example of the many small joys and pleasures that all amount to a connectedness in our neighborhood that I don't believe I would have if there weren't places like the Yacht Club or Bruno's to gather around and participate in my community. I think opening up more of Ben's neighborhoods to adaptable and gentle commercial uses reduces car reliance, increases livability, and helps people feel more connected to their place that they live. And for those reasons, I support it. I just wanted to offer my perspective here. I know Kristen from Central Oregon Land Watch has a presentation for you all in a little bit. They've done a great job with this initiative, and I'm really excited for you all to hear what they have to say. Thank you.
Okay, next up we have David Berger to talk about the electrification process. Dave, same routine for you. We got the clock up here, but thank you for being here.
All right,
Take it away.
Chair and BDAB committee. My name's David Berger. I'm with UA Local 290 Plumbers and Steam Fitters. A union represents plumbers and steam fitters in the state. Also, the president of the Oregon State Building Construction Trades Council that represents 31 construction trades in the state of Oregon, which is about 50,000 workers. I live here in Bend. I serve on some committees here in Bend. Served with Gary North on the East Cascades website, East Cascades Works Investment Board. I'm here to talk about the electrification process that the city of Bend is going through right now. And I believe that it is a very important decision that needs to be made. It needs to be thought out carefully. And I would respectfully request that myself and or the building trades are involved in this process. I believe that a informed decision comes out to a well thought out process that will affect everybody equally and do the right thing. So that is my ask, that the building trades and myself are involved in that process. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Dave. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
So you guys know, we're going to be talking about the electrification policy options here shortly with Cassie, and part of that discussion will be around the joint committee structure and process. So that would be a consideration when we talk about at that point. All right, lastly, we have Chris Piper to come up, and he is going to talk about agenda number 5 around investment. And we are happy to see a familiar face, so go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, it's nice to be back in this familiar room. So thank you, Chair. Thank you, the BDAB committee. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a privilege, seriously, to be here today, not just as a longtime advocate for Ben's economic vitality, but as someone who has had the honor of serving the city in multiple capacities, as a former Bend City Councilor, a former board member of the Downtown Bend Business Association, and a former ex officio of the member of BDAB. I've seen firsthand how local government and business communities can work together to shape a thriving, resilient economy. Today, I continue to work as a board member of both COIC and EDCO, helping to guide regional strategies that support inclusive growth across Central Oregon. The recent August 28th Invest Bend focus group stakeholder meeting was more than a conversation. It was a catalyst. It marked a turning point in our collective effort to support and strengthen the City of Bend's Economic Development Department. As Katie and Cyrus lead the development of this department, we must ensure that its foundation is built with intention. That means prioritizing the inclusion of BIPOC and marginalized businesses. Their lived experiences, entrepreneurial insights, and resilience must inform the department's strategy and framework. Economic development doesn't stop at city limits. We must think regionally, revisiting models like COIC's strategic plan and collaborating with other city departments across Central Oregon. If we're serious about building a scalable and sustainable economic framework, then BIPOC and marginalized entrepreneurs must have a seat at the table, not as an afterthought, but as essential contributors. This is not just about representation, it's about building an economy that reflects the full strength and diversity of our region. So here's my call to action. Let's commit to building a regional coalition that uplifts BIPOC and marginalized community businesses. Let's share data, align resources, and create intentional pathways for these entrepreneurs to thrive. Let's ensure that every economic development conversation includes their voices, their challenges, and their successes. Together, we can build an economy that works for everyone, and it starts with us. Thank you.
Real quick, before we jump to the next agenda item, we have Mike Richards, who is serving as our ex officio seat for St. Charles Health System. Mike, I hate to put you on the spot. Do you maybe want to come up to the table and introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Just right there.
Yeah, right there is great.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Mike Richards, I'm VP of Business Development for St. Charles Health System and new member on the committee, so I'm excited to be here. Apologize, I'm a few minutes late. Got a little stuck in traffic, so.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Our mayor had thought that this would be a great opportunity to have St. Charles as such a prominent partner in our community with close impacts to economic related topics or policies that are going to arise, to just have a standing seat for someone to represent. We're very happy that Mike took the initiative to apply for BDAB, so thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay.
We do have a couple folks on it.
But not, okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Mike.
Any other public comment?
Nope, that is it.
That. Thanks, everyone. Mayor Pro Tem Perkins.
Sorry. I didn't realize you were staring at me. Hi, everyone. For those of you who have kiddos in school, hope it all went smoothly these last few days. Would love to fill you in a little bit on what we did last week at our council meeting and then what's coming up. We had a pretty short meeting on last Wednesday. We heard from Dick Tobiasen about the Medal of Honor Highway. There's going to be a really great celebration spanning from Boston to the coast, the other coast, next summer, which will be really great. It's also, we had a proclamation for Constitution Week, and we had a proclamation for Welcoming Week, which, for those of you who don't know, Welcoming Week is coming up very shortly in the next few days. There are a ton of awesome community events that are span all over the city, all different types of events. And I would really encourage you to take a look on, it's posted on the website for Welcoming Week, and trying to attend as many as you can. We also heard from the Human Rights and Equity Commission about their work plan, and talked a little bit about how we can integrate their work more into the work that we do, not only as counselors, but with other committees. And I think what we agreed to and what we'll see more and more is a lot of what we're doing with electrification is a lot of committees getting together and sort of sharing their expertise and having those back and forth conversations. Because I think that's when sort of the most effective policy can actually be recommended to council. So we start our new every meeting Wednesday schedule this week. So we have a work session this week at 4 o'clock. We had intended to talk about the result of the legislative session, but for those of you who do not know, there is not a result of the legislative session yet. I think it's the 17th that they're meeting again. So we'll kind of touch on it and kind of see like where it's headed, where we think it's headed. We're also going to be talking about the transportation fee, in case you're interested, and specifically also the transportation fee for Bend Parks and Rec Department. It's a little bit of an outlier in these discussions. And finally, we'll also be talking about parking districts, which are something that we're really looking into more and more as we figure out how we're going to manage parking in our city. Then the following Wednesday, on the 17th, we have our council meeting, and that's at 6 o'clock. I keep having to remind myself because all the times have changed. And we are going to be talking a little bit about the police contract for automated traffic enforcement in our community. And the big topic is going to be the TSSA, the Juniper Ridge Temporary Safe Stay Area, sort of where we're at and what kind of changes we might be wanting to make to that. And kind of come to some form of consensus as a council before we go into our joint meeting with the county later that month. And then just want to keep reminding you, a very important work session on the 24th is when we talk about the Midtown crossings. That again will be from 4 to 6. And we'll have a little bit of a presentation from Colin about private development engineering review. And our county meeting that I mentioned earlier is going to be on the 29th from 4 to 6. And we'll be talking about Juniper Ridge. We'll be talking about the landfill and solid waste franchise agreement. So just to keep you posted on a few things and happy to answer questions or.
Anyone have anything?
Thank you. Thanks.
Application.
All right, welcome Cassie Lacey. She's in the city manager's office with myself and serves as a senior management analyst running all of our sustainability initiatives. For those that are new to the board, we have been having ongoing conversations with BDAB around how we provide input around potential new policy with electrification and supporting decarbonization in our community. And it's been very collaborative, and I think the intent is for it to continue that way. So Cassie's going to provide a little bit of an update as to the most recent conversation that council has had around this topic and what the next steps are for how BDAB will contribute to shape whatever policies come to be.
Thanks, Cyrus.
Take it away, Cassie.
Hi, everyone. As Cyrus said, my name is Cassie Lacey. I'm a senior management analyst in the city manager's office. And I'm going to share an update with you about our electrification policy options initiative, which as Cyrus framed for you all, BDAB has been involved with for the last 9 months or so. I'll start with some high-level background to provide some context for this effort since it's been a while. And also, I know that there are some new members who weren't around for that whole background. So last year, we launched a process to explore different policy options that we have to reduce natural gas use in Bend. This has been a goal and a priority for the council since the beginning of the last biennium. They requested that the Environment and Climate Committee, that's a different advisory committee that I'm the staff liaison for, they asked the Environment and Climate Committee to, for me to work with them to review different policy options that we have to encourage electrification Bend and to deliver a recommendation to the city council about which policy options we should pursue. So the ECC delivered a recommendation to the council in December, and their recommendation was multifaceted, but the biggest priorities for them was that they recommended that the council should pursue directly restricting natural gas use in new development through either right-of-way restrictions or through regulating nitrogen oxide emissions. Or if we determine that those regulations were not feasible, to pursue a fee on natural gas appliances in new construction. So that was kind of the heart of their recommendation to the council in December. Their biggest focus was that we should eliminate natural gas from new buildings, since it's easiest and more cost effective to electrify when done upfront as compared to retrofitting buildings. And then they did also have an additional recommendation for existing buildings, which was that the city should also pursue developing an incentive program to try to get people to convert their existing buildings. So in response to the ECC's recommendation, the council directed staff to further engage with this group and also our Affordable Housing Advisory Committee to get further input on how to encourage electrification in Bend. At that time, staff also introduced a recommendation so we held a joint committee meeting between with BDAB, AHAC, and the ECC. And at that time, the staff introduced a recommendation to that group that was a little bit different than the ECC's recommendations to council about how we felt like we should pursue the kind of next phase of this policy work. And I will share what that work plan was in a moment. So we had a meeting with this group in February, and then after that, staff came and presented to the council in April. We shared the same staff proposal to the council then, and the direction that we got from the council in April was that, let me just switch to what that work plan was. So this was the work plan that we shared with this committee in February. The first is that we'll start by focusing on an outreach and education initiative to provide information and try to drive voluntary uptake and increased electrification. So that work is something that we've already been pursuing, and it's been underway since the spring. We've been doing a lot of work just through our traditional kind of outreach and education work, like social media campaigns, our newsletter, and our website to inform on a variety of climate topics, including electrification. And then we also, another part of our outreach and education initiative has been to launch an Energy Navigator program that was planned to start this summer or fall. But earlier this year, the council did a review of their council work plan priorities, and they, as part of a bigger discussion about what the council priorities were for this year, they proposed that we actually focus this part of the outreach and education, switch the focus to next year so that we can really focus on our incentive work. And then the next big focus of our electrification work plan, which is really what we're talking about today, was to develop an incentive and disincentive package that would help transition our building stock to increasingly all electric buildings. And as part of that, we would be pursuing the concept of looking at a fee for an electrification disincentive, and then using the revenue from that fee to create an incentive program to further incentivize electrification if we have proceeds from that fee. So this is what we shared with the joint committee in February and then shared again in April. And one of the switches that came in April was that we had shared this with you all in February, saying that we would look kind of broadly at incentive, disincentive options. And then the council, and that we would investigate a fee, but not necessarily pursue a fee. Would be kind of one of many options we would look at. And then in April, when we went to the council, they agreed that they wanted us to really focus on creating incentives and disincentives, but they did want us to really focus on the fee as a foundational part of that policy effort. So that was a subtle shift since I talked with you all in January, and even from what the joint committee heard in February, is kind of the council's direction that we do definitely want to look at the fee as kind of a foundational part of that. And then the third part of the work plan is that we will be continuing to monitor pathways for restricting gas. So there were those ideas that the Environment and Climate Committee had been highly interested in, like the right-of-way regulation and the nitrogen oxide regulation. And we told the council that we thought we should hold off pursuing any of those right now, but that we could continue monitoring kind of the efforts where those are happening elsewhere in the country. We could monitor that for them so that if they wanted to pursue those things in the future, they could consider doing that. But we're not actively pursuing those at this time, just the monitoring for developments. So that's the work plan. And sorry, I kind of muddled that, but we presented that in February for you all. And then we talked with the council about it in April as well. And we're essentially moving forward with the work plan that we shared with the joint committee in February, with just that subtle shift of being kind of more focused on the fee as opposed to looking at the fee amongst a bunch of other incentive options. Some more information I wanted to share with you all is that we have been in the time over the summer since we got that direction from the council, we've been trying to figure out our baseline with respect to how many new buildings in Bend are building with gas versus all electric, is just kind of some foundational data that we need. So we've been able to shed a little bit of light into that from our permit data. So I wanted to share those findings with you today. So this first slide shows all new construction applications between 2020 and 2025. The blue bars indicate permit applications that have gas on site, and the green bars indicate applications that have no gas on site. So you can see here that a large majority of all new construction uses gas in Bend, and most prominently, single-family dwellings really predominantly use gas. Other small residential like townhomes, duplexes, and ADUs use gas the majority of time, though the gap is a little bit smaller. Large multifamily is the only residential building type that is predominantly all electric. And then on the commercial side, this data shows that more commercial buildings do not have gas hookups. However, the commercial data is not entirely accurate for this particular inquiry because the permit data captures buildings at an early stage of development where the gas systems is not necessarily brought on yet. So if we wanted to get a better understanding of how many commercial buildings use gas, we would need to look into that data and find a different data source to help us get at that. We believe that the majority of commercial does actually use gas, but I just included it in this data set to just kind of show the type of data that we have. So I have a couple more slides that zoom in on particular residential building types to look at their trends between 2020 and 2024. This slide shows on the left single-family gas use. So you can see in that time period that a whole 95% of single-family homes use gas. The multifamily data shows that only 12% of multifamily applications in the last 5 years have used gas. These two graphs show townhomes and duplexes between 2020 and 2024. It's a similar story here. 88% of townhomes use gas and 76% of duplexes use gas. So the big conclusion from this data is just that we use a lot of gas in our residential construction, with the exception of large multifamily. And I framed that for the council. It's helpful for us to know because some of the peer cities that we've looked at that have similar fees, like Ashland, their baseline is really different. A lot of their new construction is using all electric already. So, it will impact a large portion of the construction sector. And that's just something that I think we need to go into it with eyes wide open about. And also likely that there are various conditions, market conditions, and other conditions that probably drive that, the baseline use of a lot of gas, which may be different than some of the other cities that have explored this particular policy. So in order to develop the fee and incentive program, we have several policy decisions that need to be happened. In order to develop the fee and incentive program, we have several policy decisions that need to be worked through. This slide summarizes those policy decisions. So in the most general sense, we need to clearly define what the ultimate goal of the fee is in order for us to orient the rest of the policy work around that appropriate goal. So for example, two possibilities that lie on a spectrum is, to what extent are we trying to create a fee that really drives behavior change? And to what extent are we trying to raise revenue for an incentive? Because if you had a really effective fee that was driving the behavior change, in theory, you would potentially not have revenue for an incentive. So that's one of the types of questions that we just kind of need to frame for ourselves before we really create this fee, is like, what is the most important thing that we want to accomplish? Or where are we kind of on that spectrum? And those are just two options. That's not the only type of thing we have to think about with the fee. So that's one important aspect that we have to figure out. And then once we have that answered, we need to determine what factors should be included in our fee and how to define their values. So that's really going to be the heart of the fee development process, is like, how is the fee defined? What are the numbers in there, and what do they mean? How are they kind of getting at the impact that we're trying to get to? And what those factors are will depend in part on the first question about what specifically we're trying to achieve. So for example, Ashland, who has done a similar fee, the purpose of their fee was really that they wanted construction to pay for the true or their fair share of the impact of the additional climate impact that they create when they build a building with gas. So they base their calculation off of this concept called the social cost of carbon to do that. There are other cities that wanted their fee to they were more interested really specifically in driving the behavior change. So they developed their fee by doing an analysis of the market cost to switch to electric. And they set their fee based on those numbers so that they could be sure it drove that behavior change. So what those factors are will depend. That's why it will depend on kind of getting a little bit more direction from council on what they really want to accomplish with that. And then our fee development will be coming up with those numbers. And then the last part is that we'll also need to determine what our incentive program should be and how it should be structured. And hopefully we can do that once we have some at least general sense of scale of like how much revenue we may have to work with to do an incentive, or if there's little revenue, are we looking at other types of incentive programs that aren't reliant on revenue? So that is where BDAB comes back in, is that our plan is to reconvene the joint committee that we convened in February to help us work through that fee development and help us answer those questions and develop this fee. We are going to get the question on what is this fee really trying to accomplish. That's a question that we'll have with the council in the coming months. And then we'll start the public process with the joint committee after that, so that the joint committee can help us, shape how the fee comes together. So we would like 3 members from BDAB, AHAC, and ECC to participate in this ad hoc committee. You all had representatives in February. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same representatives, because that was obviously a long time ago. That was committing to a one-time meeting, where this is going to be at least probably six-ish months of meetings that people are able to regularly commit to. So we're looking for 3 members from each. We will also be offering ex officio seats to Cascade Natural Gas, Pacific Power, and Central Electric Co-op, so that they can be providing us with just good information to help inform that fee development. And then we intend to have additional developer and industry stakeholder roundtables as needed. So if there are points in time where the joint committee feels like they want more information from the actual developer community, we plan on facilitating roundtables so that we can get kind of broader input to the joint committee, so that can help inform the joint committee's recommendation. So that is the plan for the process. And then as far as the next steps, like I said, we do want to have that check-in with the council in order for them to kind of set that direction on the overall goal. So we have a meeting scheduled with council on October 22nd. We're currently in the procurement process for a consultant that has experience in this type of fee development that will support the whole process. So we're getting them onboarded now. They will join us for the meeting with the council on the 22nd to help frame some options for the council about kind of the big picture direction and goal for the fee. And then we plan on starting that joint committee meeting after that. So we expect those meetings to begin in November. My estimation is that we can, through the winter and the spring, we should be able to get all that policy work done. So my goal is for us to be able to have something to recommend to the council in the spring. So that is it, and I'm happy to answer any questions. about the process or the background for people that were not involved in the background. And then ultimately we would like 3 members. We technically have, we don't necessarily need 3 people to identify themselves today, but it would be good in the next month or so to select those 3 committee members.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Cassie.
Good question. Right. So Cassie, I think Gary and I was at that last
Yeah.
conversation, right?
Those 2 of you.
Part of that conversation, was one, making sure that the developer community was actually involved and had a consideration in this. And 2 weeks earlier had a discussion about having the trades contribute to this as well. So is there an opportunity before that joint group meets to have feedback from the developers and the trade community?
Well, so we're envisioning engaging them in those roundtables in that format. And is there a specific type of feedback you're thinking we need before the joint committee?
This is the next question then, because the fee in that second scenario where it's a disincentive or it's punitive, we'd have to understand whether it's actually an effective punitive measure. If there are cities that have stood this up before, there should be some track record of whether or not they saw a change in some measured number. So you're looking at commercial residence use and others. So whenever they're standing up of a fee and a charge like this, was there actually a change? So getting that feedback would be important. And then additionally, the developer community ideally would have some experience and knowledge of what happened in other cities as well. So getting them to understand, this is where we're trending right now. So for example, if they come in and they say, look, we agree with you guys and the fee is not necessary, then the conversation's kind of new. And also part of the other conversation that we had in February were considerations of lawsuits. And so if there is a strong opposition in the developer community where there's potential for a lawsuit, all that would be helpful for that, I would think, for that joint community to consider as they go into trying to figure out what the goal of it would be.
Yes, I have a few responses to that. So the question about like how has this worked in other cities? In the council presentation, I gave a council presentation on August 18th, and I outlined for them the other cities that have fees sort of similar to this. And one of the points I made there is that there are very few other policies actually like this. There are basically 2 in existence. They're both pretty different. One of them is the Ashland model that we have referenced, but Ashland's is actually not in effect yet. It goes into effect January 2026. And then the other city that has a fee like this, although it's different enough that I'm not even sure how transferable it would be, went into effect January 1st, 2024. So they have about a year and a half. And in Burlington, they have not had to assess the fee at all because everyone has complied, but theirs works really differently. They have a dramatically different development context. So that was part also of what I framed for the council. So there's just, I guess the point is that this policy is it's a fairly novel policy. So there's not a lot of, I don't think like the developers, there's not a lot of information that developers would be able to provide about this type of fee and how it has changed behavior in other places. And then the lawsuits question is something that we're, working with our legal teams on. And we've given the relevant information about the level of risk and all of that to the council, and the council, has still decided to continue moving forward with this. So I think at this time we've gotten the council has gotten the feedback that they need to give us a direction, like, yes, continue to do this. Based on some of those things, if that makes sense. So that's some of those things that you brought up are not really at question now. They were sort of more a question in the earlier part of the process before they directed us to pursue the fee.
Okay. So this policy is fairly new, so there's not a lot of empirical data that would support the impact of a fee change. And I think you're also saying that, it's premature to have a conversation with developers.
Well, I think that we'll have the conversation with the developers once we start the joint committee process and we're working through the fee development. I just don't think it doesn't, to me, it doesn't, there's not a clear purpose for that before the meeting with the council on October 22nd.
Yes, man, but it was something that was asked for in that joint conversation initially, was in February, was that it sounded like we wanted to hear those voices. One other thing, could you go back to your groupings of who's right, it was before this as well, it was, yes, this one. So if a single family dwelling is the largest area where we're seeing gas use over electric, what's the value chain in that decision? So like, I'm assuming that these are homes for individual buyers, and either they're requesting or they're being sold on using gas versus electric. So perhaps understanding that that decision-making process, and developing a communication program around folks who are building new homes as individuals that could assist in changing that. So I'm wondering if we have enough information around that decision-making process for new home builders, such that there's a way to which there's an influence on those home buyers, so that they could make the switch voluntarily from gas to electric.
Yeah, and we do, that's part of our work plan, is why we start with outreach and education. So we're doing kind of modest work, I would say, at this point, to try to get people to voluntarily make that switch just based on providing good information. And sort of the more meaningful part of that outreach work was going to be our Energy Navigator program, where the idea is that we are providing a service where we're actually providing kind of one-on-one assistance with homeowners to help them make the switch to electric in their homes. And I had not really thought about how it applies to like the part that you're talking about, like people purchasing homes, especially new construction and that. But the Navigator program is kind of where we were planning on working through some of that stuff. Like, how can we, what are the different points where intervention points where we can kind of influence people's behavior by providing information and other resources, and then trying to provide those one-on-one. So that's what that program is hoping to achieve. But the council in their discussion just decided that that initiative was a lower priority for them than moving forward with the this incentive policy work.
Fee discussion has been going on a long time, this death by 1,000 cuts. And
Yeah.
it's a little disappointing that, council's pushing for additional fees without having information that we asked for. Part of what I remember was about a $10,000 increase per home price to go from gas to electric. I don't know that any of this has ever been confirmed, so these are just from memory. And sort of anecdotal questions that I'm not looking for an answer for, but does the state have initiatives that align with any of this?
With encouraging electrification.
Putting money in, yeah. So is there some sort of a matching program where if the city of Bend starts to do this, that the state steps forward and contributes as well? So that it's not all borne by essentially the consumer in the end. Because it does, we continue to talk about the lack of affordability in Bend, but we continue to add to the lack of affordability through these decisions. And I don't know at the median home price for a home in Ashland as compared to Bend. That might be interesting to know. And then the October meeting with the council, what are they deciding?
That's where we will talk with them about like what is the goal of the fee on this spectrum of like, are you trying to really drive behavior change, which would be a higher fee, versus kind of on the one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is more like raise a tiny bit of revenue and send more of a signal. And some options in between those. the Ashland model being have people pay for their climate impact using the social cost of carbon would probably be somewhere in the middle of that. So, and then we'll outline that with different pros and cons for them of those different approaches. So that's what our intention is for that meeting.
And then the joint committee will respond to whatever decision is made through that process. So
Yeah,
the decision will already be made and the joint committee will be trying to help weed out whatever that decision point is.
yeah, the council, the idea is that the council gives the direction about, you know, since we've been talking about this for a while and they've said make a fee, and it's just kind of further, you know, in April, they said, we want you to pursue this fee. And so as we started looking into how would we go about creating a fee, it raised these questions for us. It's like, well, it like, I don't know how to make the fee until, because there's these different pathways we can go down that have different implications. So that's why we're going to lay out that information for the council so that they can just kind of give a little bit more context about their decision saying pursuing the fee. It's like, well, what are you hoping is achieved by this fee? And then the committee, the joint committee helps us figure out, okay, if council says this is what we're doing, they're going to help us figure out how to make a policy that achieves that goal. So I see that as consistent with, you know, some of the other types of policies they've pursued. And I was not the staff person for these, so I don't know, you know, all the nuances of them, but something like the tree code or the tough, where the council says, this is what we're doing. And then we're going to pull together these stakeholder groups to help us shape, to figure out how we make a policy that achieves that goal, but the council being the one that's setting the direction on that goal. So that was how we framed it for them in August. And they agreed with that approach. So that's how we're moving forward right now.
Casey, given this is a novel policy, I would really encourage you to engage with the folks that are going to be most impacted, the developers, by this as early as possible and even include them in the roundtable. Because if we don't understand the downstream consequences of this, we could have some real disconnect. You know, if, for example, you know, if I'm looking for a home and I want a natural gas stove and I'm not gonna buy one that doesn't have it, you know, that's my behavior. But the developers are the ones that are trying to meet the needs and they're gonna be impacted. And just an open forum for them that are going to be most impacted to give you guys feedback up front instead of later in the process, I think would be helpful.
Yeah, okay.
Just to follow up on that also. And it sounded like you were saying that there's not a lot of tested and true on the disincentive side for having a fee. But you're gonna have a council meeting where you're gonna propose an argument for it using what data?
Well, we're not arguing for the fee. The council already told us to pursue the fee. So that direction was provided already. So we're trying to understand what they really want to accomplish through that fee.
Gotcha.
So the information that we'll provide, that's one of the reasons we're hiring a consultant now, is that we're hoping that to help facilitate council's discussion on this, giving them a few options of like, you want to pursue a fee, like, are you trying to accomplish this? Or are you trying to accomplish this? And then have some analysis on like, if this is what you're trying to accomplish, here's the potential impacts that might be, but at a high level, because, you know, it's going to be framing for now. So providing analysis and information for them to land somewhere there.
I just hope that we are not manifesting an answer to a question that doesn't have a tried and true data set beneath it, so that we unintentionally mislead council into what a fee could do. If we don't know what the success was, one of the questions should be, is how will we measure the success of a disincentive? And if there isn't a tried and true model there, we should be honest with council and tell them that, look, this is some of these things we won't be able to measure at this particular, or we're not sure how we will measure those.
Yeah. Thank you.
Dave spot.
Mark, I saw you had your hand raised. Do you have anything you want to share?
No, I think the chair and Dwayne did a good job of expressing my concerns and my memory of February where we were told things would cost more money and that there was considerable legal implications. So yeah, thank you.
And the legal issues were much more strongly around those regulatory approaches. So we did, as staff, we recommended to the council that we don't pursue those at this time for that reason. The fee is seen by our legal team as not risk-free by any means, but lower risk than some of those other options. And that's something that, we have framed for the council. And we'll continue to, I should say that, so in October, when we have the opportunity to frame these things, there might be different legal implications for those different approaches to the fee. So that will be part of what we frame for them. And the council, at that point, we'll always be able to continue. I guess I don't want to make it sound like we're doing it no matter what. There's a lot of analysis that needs to be done and a lot of decision points that need to happen. And at any of those times, if the data that does come out of that paints a picture where it's this is a really bad idea, the council will be able to see that and be able to respond accordingly. And one of the challenges is that there's lots of questions that could be answered, but there are so many, and answering all of those questions is almost impossible until we are working on a more specific policy. So part of what we're trying to do is really figure out what we're trying to accomplish so that we can get good data to answer those specific questions and see how it shakes out. So the intention is not sensing the feeling that it's oh, there's no data, there's all these unknowns, and you're forging ahead with it. And I think the direction from the council is that they're interested enough that they want us to continue pursuing it, but the pursuit of it involves uncovering information that will help us answer some of these questions that could potentially lead to a different conclusion than where we think we are now. But their intention is that they would like to pursue a fee. They know that we only have so much information right now, and that they will continue to get that information. So I think a lot of this feedback, it's one of the reasons that we're doing the joint committee to figure out the fee, because I think some of these tension points will bubble up as we're trying to work through how do we define this fee. So it's just an will be a process. I don't mean to say it's all a done deal.
Yeah, just to be clear, I don't think that it's purely a question of well, there's no data, and so to propose the wrong answer. I think it's a matter of saying what problem are we actually trying to solve, and are we seeking the right solutions? For example, if we're trying to solve the problem of, and if you look at the numbers we had there earlier, single family use of gas over electric, that may have a specific answer to it, like communication, like understanding that buying process and development process, who's influencing that decision. That may be different than saying, oh, we have a problem, we think a fee is going to solve this problem, right? And so it's really just a matter of deconstructing or constructing specifically what we perceive the problem to be, versus we have this, we talked about a fee, so let's see what a fee can do for us, right?
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you on that. Yeah.
You said, especially if the data that you have on the commercial side is as inaccurate as you believe it is, the biggest impact may actually come from commercial reduction in natural gas usage than single family, just given the size of most commercial buildings compared to residential. So it'd be, I think, once again, get into crystal clear, what's the council trying to solve? If it's about net reduction in natural gas consumption, well, the pathway really needs to be rooted in where the biggest data sources are of that consumption to begin with. And if the mitigation strategies are going after single family homes to begin with, that may actually be a red herring just based on volume as opposed to true consumption. So
Yeah.
I think really rooting ourselves in data is the most important first step to this whole process.
Yeah. And as far as the overall natural gas impact, we do have data about the overall consumption of natural gas split between residential and commercial. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head about the gas part of it, but in terms of overall GHG emissions, residential is a little bit larger than commercial. It's 28% residential of our whole all of our emissions, and then commercial is like 20%. And the other thing I wanted to add, just since it triggered this that I didn't say in my presentation, is that the council we recommended this and kind of confirmed with the council that this phase of the fee will be focused on residential construction, not on commercial, in part because of the data challenges with commercial, but also the feeling that commercial just introduces a lot more complexity than residential to begin with. So we'll be focusing on residential data, and based on our overall emissions information, knowing that residential is just a larger electricity and gas consumer, like a larger energy consumer in our community, that feels aligned with that. And then the commercial discussion would happen later if it happens.
Just add one additional thought. I mean, I don't have the data to back it up, but the amount of new home building that's going on in our community right now, would suggest that the education at this moment in time is critical, given the amount of new home starts that are happening. So to walk away from the Energy Navigator program and consumer education in favor of focusing on the fee development seems like a little bit of a backwards, priority set, just in the sense of this is the time to make the biggest impact if we're going to be focused on the net new consumption of natural gas. So I would just suggest from that perspective that some opportunity to make education of a higher priority, should be on the council's consideration set.
I think it's a point well taken, and that's certainly feedback that BDAP can provide as we continue through the joint committee structure process. But in terms of priorities, I think you raise a good point.
Sorry, I have one more thing, and maybe you've already discussed this, but long range, we're talking about first impact fee costs for developers, builders. That's gonna go down to the consumer on building their home, but are we considering the long range impact and energy cost associated between those two choices, which is kind of get back to why is people making a decision to go natural gas in a single family home? Most likely is heating costs during the winter, and what impact does that do to a single family person or persons long range to that? And if we're trying to incentivize people to be able to afford single family homes, what is that extra cost monthly putting on that individual, right?
Yeah, that will definitely be part of the analysis that we do as part of the cost question. How much does it cost? And it's a really big, important question for me. It's also something in the joint committee in February, we talked a lot about costs. And I know everyone's antsy to get like solid numbers on like how much does it cost, which I'm hoping that this consultant can help us provide. Because there are people who will tell you, and there are studies that will tell you like, oh, it's cheaper to have electricity. Those studies, are often larger in scale, national or regional or something. There are people who will tell you that it's more expensive ongoing. And of course, it's changing all the time too, since the rates are changing. So yes, we will definitely be trying to get some information to help orient us in that discussion, even though it'll be impossible to be precise about it since no one knows the future of rates or anything like that. And also it will depend like efficient electric equipment versus like electric resistance equipment will have wildly different cost impacts and greenhouse gas impacts. So that's another thing that like needs to be folded in somehow.
I think we're getting close to time here, so we have 3 quick decisions or things for the board to provide input on. First is regarding the public comment that was given by Dave requesting that a trades representative be included in the joint committee structure. That's not something we've discussed as staff necessarily, but if the board would like to recommend that, then now would be the time to do so.
I don't think that we know what the joint committee structure is other than representatives from the city commissions.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it is. So they're like, I don't know, I didn't hear the recommendation because I came in late, but what was the recommendation that we would add like a 10th seat for someone outside of those?
For someone from the trades.
It would be ex officio. Was that specified? Oh, okay.
Similar to what we're proposing for the utility.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, are we doing this for anybody else?
We have talked about having seats for Pacific Power, Cascade Natural Gas,
And Central Electric Co-op.
And so this would be a similar seat to theirs.
Do you need a motion or a recommendation?
A motion to recommend.
Okay.
And it would probably be a recommendation to bring to the council by the October 22nd meeting at the latest, because that will be kind of like when it's after that October 22nd meeting that we're gonna, formalize that group and make a resolution establishing it and everything.
Yeah, so now would be the time because we're firming up that structure.
So let me ask you a quick question, and Dave, this would be directed at you, I guess. Can you express the value of what you would bring to the table? Or what you think labor would bring to the table?
I do believe labor would bring a lot to the table. This affects the building construction trades in the community in which we live in, that are trying to build homes here, that are trying to live in homes they build here. And then also the community we live in with the environment that they want to keep, clean water and clean air in. That their expertise in that is very valued, and that we bring a lot of real facts, where I heard a lot of questions up there about these facts and these facts and these facts. I believe that the building construction trades can bring those facts to light.
Can I follow up on that? So just this question between, and I know we're not gonna necessarily talk about commercial, but the technology between heat pumps and the furnace, does that play a role in the single family? Do you believe that plays a role in single family development in the use of gases, where the consumer may not be as informed about what a heat pump can do?
I do believe that plays a role. It's a dual fuel heat source in a home, and I think it should be considered. Cascade Natural Gas is doing a pilot program right now. It's just kicking off the ground this month for that exact thing, for 24 homes in Bend, so they can provide data to councils and groups like this to have informed information. So yes.
Gotcha. So that to me is one of the bigger questions, is that heat pumps use versus furnace.
Yeah, just the clarification of data is something we've been seeking, so I think anything we can do to help with that.
I'd like to make the motion. I'm not quite sure on the wording, but move that the council considers, that we recommend they consider including the trades broadly in as you move forward with the roundtable and joint committee. And can you craft that with something that makes sense?
Well, and
You're about there, I think, just
to
saying.
clarify, the intention, which I didn't make as clear, is we had those developer roundtables and the intention was to include the trades in those groups. So if you wanted it to be more than those roundtables, if you wanted to be an ex officio seat, I think specifying that would be helpful. Because if it's more general, like the plan is to, involve everybody generally, including the trades who we've spoken with,
They
yeah.
need to be ex officio, and I would recommend more than one seat. Can I do that?
Well, we're not necessarily providing more than one seat for the other groups, so I think from an equity perspective, that would probably be limited to one, would be staff's recommendation, but you can propose whatever you'd like.
I'll move forward with one seat,
Okay,
ex officio.
does anyone want to take a stab at maybe summarizing that? Or I can help. It'd be something like.
The name.
VDOT proposes to have an ex officio seat for the trades group, as council considers a joint. With the joint committee structure.
For electrification.
Thank you.
All right, second,
I second.
all in favor,
I-
Aye.
any opposed? All right. Last question, or I guess second to last question, is gonna be around the development community. I heard a lot of comments about when to bring representatives from that demographic into the conversation. Is there any recommendations on when BDAB would like to propose that happens, or are we comfortable with what has been presented?
I mean, I think it's hard because we don't have the fee structure yet for them to respond to. So what are we asking the development community to have input on specifically?
Great point.
Yeah, that was why we're gonna involve them in the process, like as we develop that.
That would be, yeah. I don't know what they could bring to the table today without understanding a little bit about what that fee would look like.
So are we asking the developers to consider a solution, or are we asking them to consider this environmental problem of gas versus electric and have them provide feedback on that? That's what I don't know.
It sounds to me like council has directed that a fee be researched. And that is what they're going to give input on, is a fee.
Gotcha.
And like, is there a presentation that shows that the fee will help council meet the goals of a 20% carbon reduction in Bend, Oregon by the end of 2027? Like, maybe that presentation was given, but not to us.
No, I mean, not specifically like that, because if part of the analysis in developing the fee will be like, these are the expected outcomes that we could see from the fee that we. Yes, because even that will depend, like if the fee was like a really low cost signal, you know, $10 a home, you would expect it to have minimal impact on natural gas use, where if it was a high fee, you know, higher cost, you know, but a larger impact on natural gas use. So that's why we're really trying to hone in on like, what are we trying to accomplish with the fee? And it will be, we can only answer some of those questions when we know where we're going. Yeah.
I think you're hearing from us that there, you know, we are interested in learning more about the cost implications for construction. And we are also interested in learning more about the economic impact to people who live in Bend, given that people who live in Bend drive our local economy. So those are the sorts of questions that we would hope to see answered through this process in the fee development. It's not just understand the impact of that fee on emissions, but also understand the impact of that fee on our housing stock and our local economy.
Yeah.
So the process by which we get to those answers maybe is by participating in this thing. See another presentation later, but that's all.
Yeah.
That's probably what we would like to, you know. And then we have obviously a very long report from February in which we asked a whole bunch of very similar questions to what I just said. So maybe this is like, we're getting to that point.
Yes,
Yeah.
we're slowly getting to that point
Yeah.
for sure. And that is, a lot of those questions are primarily, you know, a lot of those are on our radar to answer through this process, but then you're exactly right. By being part of the joint committee and having this be a joint committee rather than just our climate committee, who typically does, you know, our climate policy work, is so that you guys can be there, making sure we're doing that, raising those questions as they come up. So I think once we get into it, we'll, you know, we'll find the opportunities to make sure we're having the conversations when they need to happen.
Okay, lastly, just quick show of hands, if you are interested in participating in joint committee structure. This doesn't have to be finalized, but if you're at least contemplating it, please let me know so we can have further conversations about it.
Did you get an answer to this?
It sounded like there wasn't much feedback to be provided at this specific time, so once we know more, just making sure that they're brought to the table as proactively as possible was what I gathered.
I think we're saying, just not sure whether the fee and how we got to the solution being a fee is clear to us. It's not clear to me how we got to how the council got there. So it does feel like we should to advise council to take a step back and understand stakeholders' perspectives on this, what the cost would be, how we would measure success, and how the development community, trades community, probably give us some insights into if we want to change behaviors. And it seems like, you know, we all want to make sure that we switching from gas, I believe, gas to electric. So if there's a way in which to engage that community on the best way to change behaviors, that seems to be the first step, as opposed to talking about the with the care situation. It's taken care of. Sorry, not with.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that that's feedback that we can pass along to council, and as we have this joint committee meeting, maybe it would be helpful for us to start with that full background as the understanding to which we got to this point, and then a lot of it also just has to do with direction that is given by council throughout the process that staff are, tasked with living out.
And public comment will be at that, will there be public comment at that council meeting on the 24th?
No, because we're switching to that new council schedule, and that the meeting on the 22nd is a work session. So I believe, although I should fact check this with someone who's organizing all that, but I believe we're not doing public comment during the work sessions.
The Wednesday before.
With the Wednesday, yeah.
Before, 2 Wednesdays before that, so love to hear from you.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
That was a rather deep topic. I think maybe a 5-minute break would be good for everyone if we're okay with that. Okay, we'll do 1:05, so we'll come back at 1:10, and next we'll have our neighborhood commercial discussion.
don't get a steamy shower, but it's comfortable, right? And so it's just.
But settling that's back years later, but another adjustment. And we, you know, I did like a backup. SDS is ready, working with the station versus they're ready. Yeah.
Okay, yes, understood.
Yeah, like, I don't know, all the,
You got a pretty packed agenda, so let's keep moving. Yeah.
I don't.
Okay, so next up is the neighborhood commercial presentation. Go ahead.
Just share my screen. Awesome. Okay. All right. Well, thank you again, Chair and Vice Chair, for inviting us to speak a bit more about our concept for bringing more businesses and services to Bend's residential neighborhoods. Again, my name is Kristen Reidelberger. I'm the Associate Program Manager for the Cities and Towns program at Central Oregon Landwatch. And we have David Welton here, who is a chapter lead with Bend YIMBY as well. So I wanted to start out sharing the current code description and reiterate that neighborhood commercial does currently exist within our residential code under non-residential uses, so much like schools or parks or daycares. So it does exist within residential districts or zones, and we have a code and framework to start from. So the current code and description reads, neighborhood commercial sites within the residential districts are intended to provide pedestrian-friendly access to goods and services, convenient to nearby residents, encourage affordable mixed-use housing types, and provide a compatible transition between commercial and residential uses. In addition to new neighborhood commercial sites, this subsection also recognizes and seeks to preserve long-standing historical commercial uses that have served the neighborhood. I think the code has primarily served the second part really well. Vast majority of our neighborhood commercial uses that we do have right now are historical uses. So our goal is to really get more out of the first part and bring more new neighborhood commercial to our neighborhoods. And our code recommendations are pretty simple and separated into 3 different categories. One is broadening the allowed building types. The current code allows for standalone commercial buildings and mixed-use commercial buildings, so like Active Culture and Jackson's Corner. We would like to see the addition of live-work buildings and accessory commercial units, or ACUs, to the code. Live-work units are great because they're a bit smaller than mixed-use development, could fit into more neighborhoods and also have that housing component. And then ACUs are great because they can be, like ADUs, they can be attached or detached. And by physically separating the residential and commercial uses, there's often fewer building code compliance issues with that as well. And then broadening permitted and conditional uses. Generally, we'd like to see more flexibility as to where each of the uses that are currently allowed are permitted, conditional, or not allowed, just generally just making it more permissible so that the application process and is just more fluid and more permissible. But then we'd also like to see more uses added to the permitted and conditional uses table. Some examples could be micro-industrial uses such as small workshops and design studios, light manufacturing like woodworking, food and beverage production like small breweries or bakeries, entertainment and recreation, like fitness studios, but also also interested in exploring other uses beyond these. Of course, they would all need to be compatible with residential uses, and there are some parts of the code that kind of restrict, the nuisance factors that would go along with that. And then broadening siting standards. This one gets pretty technical with the code, but generally we think that there are some barriers currently as to where neighborhood commercial sites are permitted that we think are not really serving residents or the business community or really the stated purpose of the code. So we'd like this to be more flexible as well. And we also acknowledge that bringing more neighborhood commercial uses to our neighborhoods will likely need more than just code amendments. So some other objectives for us are committing to an annual review, which is still related to code, but similar to how the city has done with the ADU code, tree preservation code, and the Tiny TIF program. This gives us a chance to track how it's working and commit to making further adjustments down the line to make sure that we're getting those intended outcomes, and also mitigating for any unintended outcomes. And this would help take some pressure off of making perfect code on the first round, and that we can keep making that next best step as we move forward. Our second recommendation is exploring incentives, programs, and pilot projects. So small businesses and property owners will likely need some help to get these started. And these aren't necessarily recommendations, but some ideas include a revolving loan fund, tax increment assistance, some subsidized commercial rent for small local businesses for a period of time, an ADA ramp fund, city supplied bike racks, grants for frontage improvements, and this isn't necessarily a program or incentive, but having a pre-approved plan for ACUs like we have with ADUs. And then lastly, community outreach and education through communications, development navigator position, and staff generally. I think one of our questions is like, do people know that this is even an option right now? Do people know that this is part of our code? So making sure that business community, residents, and developers are made aware of this process and can get involved and help shape it, and also that they know how to get started if they want to create neighborhood commercial on their own. And then, so this is our kind of first objective, first step down the road is we would like to see this on a council work session and do a preliminary code review. We'd like to see how this fits into other city efforts like city council goals, Invest Bend, growth plan, and the community climate action plan, transportation, etc. Do a review of the current code and history of the code, see how it came to be, how we got to where we are today, what's not working, what is working, and identifying those code limitations and barriers. I think conducting interviews with the small business community, but also small infill developers. We heard from current planning that there have been some inquiries and some pre-applications over the past several years that ended up backing out, and reaching out to them to get a sense of what were those reasons that you ended up backing out of that would be great. And then forming some potential code amendments. So including our recommendations that we have here, but also any staff recommendations that come up through the process and recommendations stemming from those interviews. And then taking all of that and separating it into what are some simple short-term actions that the city could take, what are more moderate midterm actions, and bigger lifts. And then having council direction on drafting some code amendments for those short-term actions that we could take sooner, getting a sense of what we need to do for community outreach and education, and then committing to an annual review and check-in. And this is kind of my best guess as to what the simple short-term versus moderate midterm actions would be. The simple short-term actions are all things that are currently in our code. So we do have code written for live work units. They're just in different zones. And the rest of these would just be making adjustments, whereas moderate midterm actions would require, writing new code, new incentives, kind of developing those. And ACUs also, I think, could benefit from the fact that they really could be largely derived from our ADU code, and kind of taking what we learned from that process and bringing that into the commercial realm. And so for our questions, we're wondering how you see neighborhood commercial supporting the Invest Bend economic development strategy. What are some other barriers you foresee for businesses and property owners? Do you have thoughts on potential incentives, programs, or pilot projects that could support this? And then lastly, do you support recommending this topic for council and staff consideration in a city council work session?
How much time do we have?
Think about 5-ish minutes.
We're 4 minutes.
I think, we can weigh in at this point and then maybe ask to provide you with more concrete feedback at another time.
Yeah, and with just public meeting rules, it'll probably need to be at the next meeting if
Mhm.
we wanna let things digest a bit.
Yeah.
And we can certainly take this up at a future meeting. I think one point to make that we're gonna talk about a little bit later related to the economic prosperity goal area. We do specifically call out in one of the strategies and action items of leveraging urban renewal funds, including site-specific opportunities for housing, neighborhood, commercial, entrepreneurial development, infrastructure, business land development, and beautification. And so it is called out, as Kristen mentioned as well. Our planning staff have a dedicated FTE to just doing code amendment packages, and that portfolio is definitely robust and is going to be really busy for the rest of the biennium. So any recommendations that would eventually come from BDAB would likely need to be balanced in how that workload is prioritized. So just a few caveats to think about.
I think it would be great to know if today that there are people out there that would do these developments. To just better understand what, how many folks are out there that are seeing the barriers that you mentioned, and whether the code related or financial, or where those barriers are actually popping up for them in order to achieve, some of this stuff.
Mhm.
It's hard to understand the context of the conversation. Are we talking about, 1, 2, and obviously this can be developed over a period of time when options are available and people understand them better, and more people may come forward. But it'd be interesting to know today if there's, 10 people out there that would take advantage of something like this, to start a new business, or, move their business closer to their house, or whatever that looks like.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know how to get that information necessarily, but yeah. But having somebody do a little bit of the, kind of research to see, like you said, maybe the people that have applied in the past for some permits and trying to do something similar to this that were denied for some reason. If there's a way to kind of go back through the system and find those people that way, I don't know, but I'd be really curious to know how much of a sort of economic impact this would really have. See the picture a little bit better.
Mhm.
Sounds like Mark has, or sorry, Dwayne, do you have something?
Nope, Mark first.
Okay. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think at 100,000 feet, this is a great concept. I like the ideas and the thoughts around it. I'm curious if there's been a look at any undue impact or unfair impact to commercial areas and folks who have to comply with parking rules and other commercial rules in doing something like this. I think that would be my only concern, is some unfair advantage given here to those who feel that they have to get a commercial space.
That's something you guys want to speak to at all, Kristen?
Yeah, I guess we haven't really dived into that. I think these are pretty unique compared to a lot of the commercial spaces we have around the city, that are, you know, next to other commercial uses. They're in a very busy area. A lot of them are pretty auto dependent and often, I think, larger spaces than some of these would be. So these, in a way, would kind of bringing a new product into the city, but also the location factor would be pretty different. But I think that's something to keep thinking about for sure.
I think something like Bruno's serves a very different market than like the nearby Albertsons or other stores. You know, they don't carry a lot of merchandise in there. They mostly sell pizza and sandwiches and have a few corner store things. So it's kind of just different markets and allowing the market to kind of see what works in different places, which can be tough to figure out a priori.
Mhm.
So, what are the primary locations for? And I'm not going to profess that I understood this beforehand, so I have to look it up. The mixed use versus ACU and all that. So, my understanding is that ACUs can be single family home. Is that right? On their property?
Or like just in addition to you know, that there are examples in like Portland where maybe someone built out something in the front that's now serves as a barber shop or something.
Yep,
Mhm.
gotcha. And so, is there a defined neighborhood or area that you guys are thinking about that this would make sense to sort of pilot and learn, or you just broadly want a code change across the city?
Right now, the code applies throughout the city and all the residential codes. I think, you know, we're also acknowledging that there's, you know, a lack of this type of thing more so on the east side. So that could be something that council might want to kind of form like a separate pilot project or program for certain areas of the city, but as it currently exists, it applies citywide.
Gotcha. And so in Portland, there's very strong defined community organizations that get funding from the city, and they give feedback in terms of how they want coding to change. Have you reached out to the community organizations here in Bend?
Not so far. We're still working through meeting with a lot of people, but we have heard that mentioned too, reaching out to the neighborhood districts.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And just could a food truck be an ACU?
I think so. Yeah, because it would still be an accessory use to the residential unit. So you'd still have your house or, you know, duplex or what have you as a residential use is the primary use. And then a secondary use could be a food truck. I think the city would still need to decide because it's mobile, if that is a factor. But it would still be on private property. They might have to decide where it could be placed.
What's your time frame for any kind of code change or consideration change? What are you thinking on?
As far as like when we'd like to see changes made, I think there are some short-term changes that could be done, you know, probably early next year or so. I think some of the midterm or like moderate midterm actions, like looking at ACUs more thoroughly, incentives, things like that would take a little bit more research and time to produce. But some of the code amendments, like bringing live work units into the code, could be a bit simpler and shorter term.
I think from the city side, if I recommended, you know, or asked for a work session, it would be at the first meeting in October, and then we have to schedule that work session. So, and it would depend on, like Cyrus was mentioning, a lot of things. So it's something that there is time.
Yeah.
There is time to move.
Yes. So is there a way to create phases so that you have again, whatever that consideration of low-hanging fruit is, that you could think about it in terms of phases that you could bring to council and to be to consider?
Yeah, I think that would probably be the best way to approach it. Also considering that we're going into a growth planning process, which will be looking at land use and things like that. So identifying where this what parts of this really work for now that are easier to implement sooner, and then what might take a little bit more time and what might fit better into the growth plan.
It'd be really helpful if they use electricity instead of gas.
For sure.
Yeah, timing of this conversation is good, moving into our next conversation, about invest spend, so thank you for presentation.
Do we feel like you have the feedback that you're looking for, or is there any other direction?
I would support further discussion, I think, know exactly what.
I don't think a motion's needed for that. I think I just wanted to make sure that you guys felt like you had what you needed to move forward with the conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, we're turning a 60-minute conversation.
Yeah. Pretty ambitious agenda today. Let's see that. And did that work? Yes. How do I do full screen? Where's that little icon? Everybody looks for it at this point and you can't find, there it is. Okay.
We need a little bit of extra time, or can we go over by 10 minutes or something with permission from
Everyone's on board with that. If we need it. Okay.
Yeah. So, board members, Katie Brooks, I'm 2 months and like a few days into this job, and I'm the economic development officer for the city. Just wanting to give you a little context. What I thought would be really useful, cathartic on my part, and hopefully useful to you, is just kind of an overview of how this new economic development program, as well as Invest Bend, how all these pieces fit underneath the council guidelines and goals that they gave us. I think just going back up to a higher level and then digging down in might be really useful, because for several months we've been talking about the Invest Bend plan, and it has a very specific use. And it will be a strategy, but there's a whole department and a whole network around it, or a framework around it, that I thought would be really useful to spend a couple of minutes to talk about. So first off, I wanted just to start with the council economic prosperity goals and just revisit them. That they want a comprehensive economic development plan and vision, and it's measured by Bend specific economic index. So we'll get to that more specifically in the plan, but it also means having the right folks, the right policies, the right team working behind it. Leading an effort to strengthen economic prosperity by enhancing strategic partnerships. This is involving not just public-private investments and different ways of doing business, but this is how do we partner and continue to partner with folks out there in the community who may be taking a lead on this rather than the city, but we have the same end goal. And then finally is implementing an urban renewal investment strategy. And you've probably been reading a bit about that in the paper. And those of you who follow the borough meetings, they are talking a lot about what we do next as investors in a borough, not just the owners of a borough. And you'll be hearing a lot about that as we move on. So I wanted to go over the economic development program. So this program involves Cyrus and me, the mighty team of two for economic development. We also have the borough, and Jonathan Taylor works for the urban renewal area. We have real estate. We have all sorts of different departments across the city that have pieces of what they do that are economic development. So I wanted to just put some of those, not all, this is not a definitive list, but what is this program going to be about? And what is the task that I've been given coming in to develop the program? So it will help inform and policy and help council understand their decisions and their policies and drive things forward. It'll be behind infrastructure and development investments, and that goes across many different departments at the city. It'll involve business relations, business development and recruiting, planning. And we just talked about that with the previous presentation on commercial districts, but it's also about the comprehensive plan, the growth plan, and how will economic development be woven into those plans moving forward. Navigating permitting. We have a new person on board that works for community development that is a liaison for folks going through the permitting department and the process to help bring folks along, understand the program, and hopefully ease that navigation through permitting as you go. She's been on what, 3 weeks now? Yep. Economic development investments. Again, how are we investing in development? And that's not just a borough. So inside the urban renewal areas, and right now it's Juniper Ridge, it's Murphy, and it's the Central District and the Core District. We have a whole heck of a lot of other places around town that we could be building. Some that are just starting from scratch, like the Southeast area. It's about housing, but it also has a commercial component to it. How are we positioning ourselves in a way that can attract and retain businesses for those neighborhoods? And then housing, because the city looks at housing not only as a human issue, we all know about it. I don't have to get into it too much, but it's really an economic development issue as well.
Katie, can you explain what borough is for some?
Yes, I can. Thank you for asking. So the Bureau of Urban Renewal areas are special districts that are designated, and it's a separate organization under the city. They make decisions on areas designated for urban renewal through state and city code that allows them to define taxing districts, like taxing permit financing is a overlay over these districts. They often include opportunity zones, which is an opportunity for folks to invest capital gains into areas, and enterprise zones. Those are pretty much the only tools that you have in the state of Oregon to incentivize development. But those decisions have its own advisory committee, especially for the core area, and decisions are made by a separate group. So city council makes decisions on policy and all things city. Urban renewal areas has a different board, which happens to be the city council, but they have to close out the business meeting for city council before they open the meeting, which is separate for urban renewal. Is that clear? Do I need to get into it? Okay. Great. Anything else on this slide? Just a snapshot of how the city is gearing up to really focus around how we deliver comprehensive economic development across the city departments. So Invest Bend specifically is a strategy, an economic development strategy that is going to support all of those functionalities, but it goes into 4 buckets. One is it helps inform the borough, which is separate, but the borough is going to have a lot to say about Invest Bend at the end of the day, because it really talks about our strategies to invest. How are we going to build in those areas? Are we going to recruit, and what does that look like? Leverage those investments with private money that matches the public money. It means making some choices and putting money into things that may or may not be infrastructure. For example, we may be investing in a lot that we really want to turn over into something that is generating revenue and energy. We may choose to invest in that, for example. And then housing. The other piece of this are things we contract out for. Destination management is one of them. So Visit Bend does all of that. They have their own metrics of how they measure how we're doing with visitor investment, what amenities we're providing. There's a lot of responsibilities in that area that we outsource. Traded sector business recruitment, we use EDCO to help us with that. And then economic advocacy, which will be a new component. We have some assistance in that with Eric Kensler, but that Eric's work with the city is very, very broad. It goes on policy issues, you name it, all things that intersect with city interests he works on. We're looking specifically for someone who can help advocate, and mostly for infrastructure investment, mostly to educate the state legislature on the role business plays in our communities and the revenue generation they can have, and the lifestyle and all the goodness of bringing folks into new jobs and having upward mobility. So partnerships is another category. This is where we may not be in the lead role. Sometimes we might be, but this is where, for example, workforce development. There are a lot of great organizations out there, and the next one down is education. One of them is higher ed, OSU Cascades, Central Oregon Community College, East Cascade Works. There are a lot of organizations out there that do this work. We know what our business needs are. We're going to be participating. We already are at those tables, and they're very much a part of our strategy, even if we don't own it. Funding and infrastructure is it's a team sport, and there are folks out there. COBA is one of them, Central Oregon Builders Association, the Chamber, many other organizations are out there trying to get funding to come to Central Oregon so we can make those foundational investments that actually spur economic development. And then again, I'm going to repeat housing in several places here, because we're not the only ones out there doing housing. The Chamber has a housing program, Housing Works. There are nonprofits out there like Rooted Homes, Habitat for Humanity, Thistle and Nest, on and on and on. There are a lot of other folks working on this out there that we may choose to be a partner with. And then our own internal team. We are looking into what can we do to support startups, and I'll be talking about that a little bit more once we start to develop our plan and how we're making our investments. There's some interesting things we could do there alongside BDAB. Small business support, same thing. Commercial development and industrial development, building a team that actually goes out and recruits and tries to spur on this development by working with our team internally, getting land up and running, finding the infrastructure and making it ready to go. And then housing again, we have our own internal team working on that. And we have, thank goodness, some money that we're putting out there in the community with the HUD grant that we got, and a program that's pretty robust internally. So housing appears in many different places. A few of these do. But that kind of breaks down when you look at this invest spend strategy. It's not just for the borough, it's for the whole organization. And it's going to help bring decisions and opportunities up to not only the borough decision-making body, but also our city council. It's going to form a whole new department here at the city. That we'll do after we put this plan together, but how we bring each of our departments together with that lens of economic development and how we are performing against it. We're going to form some indices that we're going to measure ourselves on to measure our progress, but also things that we just monitor over time that may or may not be entirely in our control, but are really important. Unemployment numbers, the disparity of income to housing, accessibility, where people are traveling from outside of Bend into Bend, and our leakage. And Dwayne, you've talked about this a few times. These types of numbers that we need to be paying attention to. All of that feeds up into invest spend, and that in turn will dictate a strategy for these 4 different categories. Does that make sense? All right. So our next steps. We have a deadline. Our first presentation, in my last slide, I have a timeline, is to City Council in mid-October, October 15th. And it's an update on where we are at in achieving all this and in achieving that strategic plan, invest spend. So right now, we're completing a whole bunch of stakeholder interviews. We're going to have a lot of data to share on what needs are out there, what suggestions are coming up in how the city can be more actionable, and what areas of needs there are out there that we could possibly help with. We'll also complete a final focus group. This is the group that we have been using to provide input on the strengths and weaknesses, opportunity threats, that what the vision is, what tools are in our toolbox that we might want to deploy with this strategy. We'll have a full report on that. That'll inform the final investment plan. So all of that and all the data that we have gathered, this all gets mashed into a draft report that we plan on bringing to council in October. That will get revised. We'll go back out. We'll talk again to focus groups. We'll take input from BDAB and revise that to the final report that goes to in front of City Council on December 3rd. But it's really taken it's an inverted pyramid, a whole bunch of information, trying to whittle it down to what's actionable on our part, what do we monitor, and how does that affect the borough and making decisions for that separate body? How does that affect the overall City of Bend's program and how we're delivering a more comprehensive economic development plan? So there's the timeline. But one thing I want to point out is the arrow pointing that direction. Even when we have this plan done at the end of the year, it is the opening salvo to the work that has to be done. The borough will change over time. We'll get much more precise. There are very big decisions that have to be made along the lines of city investments. There are very big decisions to bring on large areas of housing and commercial and industrial infrastructure, and a whole new department and program to put together over the coming year. So Invest Bend, it's a 5-year outlook. It's a stretch goal, but really it's a focus on this biennium, which is a little under 2 years of work that we have got to do to get this thing up and running and actionable. And so we will be coming back with regular updates and requests for assistance and perspective and decisions and recommendations to council as we start to put this thing together and it bubbles up into these actionable items that we're talking about. But if we do this right over the coming year, it's going to change, or we're going to see these actionable items and boxes being ticked off. About a year, a little over a year from now, we're going to be talking about how did we do, what's left undone, what's the stretch goals that we've talked about for the next 5 years. And when we get into that next planning session phase, whatever you want to call it, for the next biennium, we should know a heck of a lot more about what we have achieved and where we really want to go, and putting a whole financial package together and just the next iteration of what Invest Bend and what the Economic Development Department and program looks like. So I just wanted to make this presentation just to set some context. I feel like it was kind of not done before, and coming on board, frankly, in the middle of the planning for this, I will share with you, has been challenging. And what I don't want to do is disrupt the really great work that has been done to date. But I also think it's really important to just take a minute, talk about where we are in this whole process. And I feel that that is where we can start these conversations of actually finalizing or putting together a draft plan. So the next pieces that you folks will see is, here are the components of this draft plan. Here's how it relates to this input that we've taken and the data that we've taken, and start to talk about those stretch goals, but also what can we meaningfully achieve in the next year and a half, 2 years together. And that is what we'll be presenting as well to council. So it's a little bit more pragmatic in its approach. I think it's probably a really good idea to be pragmatic at this stage and make sure we understand what it is we're measuring and we're trying to do together over time. Blah, blah, blah. That was a lot. So thoughts, input for me on this.
Can you say more about developing a Bend specific economic development index, like how that comes together and when and who gets to contribute to that?
That is something we're working on internally, but also taking input from the stakeholder groups, from you folks, because the tricky part of that is we can have some very real milestones that we talk about that we want to achieve in the next couple of years, and those will be fairly obvious from the plan. Other things will be a bit broader. When you start, for example, when you talk about gross domestic product, GDP, I mean, that is something you really do need to pay attention to. How much are we going to affect it by a program at the City of Bend? In 2 years, don't know about that. But it is vital information that we need to keep our fingers on the pulse of. Other things have more direct, like how many people are leaving the city to go to live and then coming in to work. That has some real ramifications to our revenue stream and also transportation, greenhouse gas emissions, lifestyle, quality of life, all of that stuff. That's stuff that we can measure and hopefully watch in incremental change over time if we do our job right. There'll also be other things happening in the next few years that we can't predict with the economy. Will interest rates go down? Will that have any impact on what it is we'll be able to achieve? Is there any correlation? Can we measure that some way? I really don't know what indices will be the ones that we'll pay most attention to for actually measuring how well we do. I think that's an iterative conversation with you guys. I think we start with, did we make some investment in the urban renewal area? Is it done? Is it moving forward? Are we moving forward with building more housing? How did we invest in that? How many more units of housing did we achieve? What's the net gain over the net loss of businesses within the city? Pretty basic stuff that I know that are more short-term that we can watch more closely.
I think just speaking to the perspective of the goal formation process, I think council had a recognition that timely, relevant, city-specific data is becoming increasingly difficult to have access to, with the Tri-County MSA being into effect and us just not necessarily having the pulse on what's within 977010203 and how do we measure those things. So I think that was also part of the thought process of the Bend specific index.
Yeah, we'll have to balance that too. Chris mentioned this in his remarks. We do belong to an MSA. The MSA is 3 counties big, and 74% of the activities, 71% of the GDP comes from Bend specifically. So what we do matters a lot, but we also have to play well with others and play as a team. And there will be opportunities to do that in the coming years too. So it's a lot, which is why this is the opening salvo at the end.
You sort of got a little bit there, what we're talking about investments, that's like the thing, seeing the return on those investments articulated in a way that's like consistent.
Yeah.
Helps folks like us in making these future recommendations be able to do so with a lot more fidelity. Like we're, some of these TIF districts are 20 years old. Like that feels long enough to sort of say, is it working? What has been the impact?
Yeah, absolutely.
And having those like very Bend specific, district specific metrics and in an index like that, how they change over time would be helpful.
Yeah, I agree.
In the Invest Bend strategy, is there a external benchmarking of kind of Bend versus other cities of similar size or of similar attributes that helps us? I mean, at 100,000 going to 200,000 people, what are the considerations that benchmark cities at the next level of, let's say scale have had to tackle in this 5-year or 10-year time horizon that are obvious things that we need to be aware of? I'm just curious about what we're doing outside of our own purview.
A lot. And you bring up a really good point. This isn't the first economic development plan ever in the universe. And there are not only peer cities within the state. We have, there's a mid-city level kind of group of folks. We all talk to each other. Cyrus and I or Jonathan are gonna we'll be talking to Vancouver and Beaverton and Gresham and Hillsborough, we'll be talking to Hillsborough. There's a lot to be learned. Also, we have peer cities across the country that we measure against. Asheville, oh gosh, help me with this. Yep, Flagstaff, Boulder, and St. George. There's a lot of places that are really similar in. We have a lot of unique qualities because we have such a diversified industry base compared to a lot of other mountain towns. But there are some that are fairly similar, and we do a lot of compare contrast. I'll tell you, when you look at their strategic plans and how they developed them, they're doing the same thing. They go out to their regional SEDS, Community Economic Development System Coordinator. COIC is ours. They work with their economic development organizations like EDCO for us. They work with private sector, other public sector, regional partners, their MSAs. Same methodology. And when you look at how they structure it, your focus is on what it is you're trying to achieve, what's your differentiating factor. And everybody's going to have different industry sectors. We spent a lot of time talking about that. And then putting your strategy together from there and putting your benchmarks more specific to your market. But there are a lot of lessons to learn, very similar types of processes and discussions going on with our peer cities.
Yeah, I'd love to see, where are we leading, where are we lagging compared to peer cities? I mean, it'd just be really helpful to understand, what's our scorecard externally.
We're both, depending on who you take a look at. Asheville is just kicking it out of the park. They have a lot of things going on over in that part of the country in the Carolinas that are different. They're just a different climate. What you'll see, I'll tell you, one of the biggest variances, the ones that are more successful have more incentivization. We don't have a lot to work with here, and that's just the way it is. But there are also things that we can learn from peer cities that have a limited amount of things of incentives. And I think the differentiating factor is how well they manage their boroughs and how they invest in their boroughs, because that is in your control to a certain degree. And that is going to be a big deal for Bend, I think, in the future.
One of the hardest parts about comparable cities for an apples to apples comparison is access to transportation and having an interstate and being as far away from an interstate as we are. That is a huge, caveat when we look at these peer cities in terms of our performance.
That's a really good point. You try and find a peer city that's not on an interstate highway.
It's rare.
It's like us. And it's hard to find anybody else. It really is.
Just one question following up. Why is our incentivization ability so low?
It's a state issue. There just aren't, and it's been 20 plus years, 25 years in the making. It is a state that most of our incentivization and our aggressiveness, and especially for Fortune 500s, was in the 1970s. And one could argue that there hasn't been a lot of breakthroughs on Fortune 500 investment since then. So the Nikes, the Columbia Sportswear, homegrown, Intel's, those were originally captured a long time ago. There have been incentives to keep them here, but as far as new and relocating and competing with other cities and states across the country, we have very limited amount of tools. Yeah.
I think our whole effort is to be as creative as we can with the tools that we do have at our disposal. And so Jonathan will be the first to tell you that we've gotten calls from folks all over the state about the site-specific TIF program and its creativity and innovation with state laws and standards. And so doing the best with what we got, but it is a limited amount of resources that we have.
I appreciate the time and I hope this was helpful in just kind of setting the table of what it is we're trying to do here. And like I said, it's an open-ended conversation and we will have more of it.
Thanks,
We
Katie.
good?
I think right before we head off, Don, I think it would be great to give a pitch on BBC since we're getting towards that end of the season. If you want to come up and talk about the band companies that you've mentioned to me that are in the process and some important dates to be mindful of.
The good thing about my role is there's a lot of folks in our organization are August to October grinding it out every day. Last Friday was Upstart Day, where we had our process where we take the top down to start with 18 companies and have to do 3-minute pitches and take questions for another 15, and we narrowed it down to 10. And those 10 will present at Pub Talk on the 25th. So that's, it's a good thing about that. The 18 companies, they're all Oregon. Of the 18 companies, 9 were Bend. So that's a really, really great trend. There was some intentionality to it, so that's great. We made a selection on Friday to the final of those 10 of that pass through. And I don't recall off the top of my head, but I'm going to say at 3 to 4 are Bend companies who will present. Don't tie me down to the exact number, but it wasn't 0 and it wasn't 1 or 2. And so they'll present and it'll be really great. It'll be, so that Pub Talk is, it will sell out. It is our largest Pub Talk of the year and the community loves it. And so, get a ticket and go. Other than that, membership ticket sales for BBC is great. The Innovation Week, and now BBC is not just BBC, it's sort of seeded Innovation Week, which is all of our other industries are participating, and it's just really wonderful energy-filled week. So I know we're over our 2 o'clock, but I hope that's a good, fresh picture of it.
Yeah, sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah,
I just thought
no.
it was a timely opportunity for you to share some of those
Yeah.
dates and where you're at in the process. So thank you.
Yeah.
So before we adjourn, I would like to bring the BDOT members up to speed on the August 28th conversation that was had. Chris Piper addressed that conversation in his comments. It was a collection of economic development professionals as well as BIPOC business owners to talk about their contributions to the investment strategy. Here at BDOT, we don't get a lot of opportunity to define agenda, but I do think it's an opportunity for us to take the time to, I would like to present that conversation to you, get your feedback. And Katie did a great job of talking about, from her perspective, what the investment strategy, where it's headed. I think that community of economic development professionals, as well as small business owners here, had some interesting feedback as well, that they would like our support in recommending proposals to council about where to move next with investment. And so I don't want to hold folks now, but I would like to ask that we have some dedicated time at our next conversation to discuss this. We can forward you the presentation materials from the conversation for your review. But it was as Katie said, it was a worthwhile stakeholder conversation. We also had the presence of Senator Broadman to come in and talk to us as well. And so as it is under BDOT's purview to provide economic development recommendations to council, I think this would be a great time. This would be a good opportunity for us to do that. One of the things that, as Katie talked about, was considered is the role and responsibilities of BURA. And BURA represents while it is a great investment tool, it represents 15% of the taxable area within Bend. So there's another 85% that Katie talked about that needs infrastructure development and a conversation about, Jen, to your question, who is involved in making those decisions. And so there were some recommendations, so proposals that came out of that conversation that I think would be prudent for us to consider as recommendations to the council. So.
Are there like notes from all of those workshops that can be shared with us?
Yeah.
Cool. That's great.
So with that, yeah, with that, I'll wait and look forward to having at least 20 minutes on the next conversation to kind of work through that. You know,
Thanks for your feedback.
thanks.
I will make sure to send the notes from the other meetings to the rest of the group.
Cool. You got anything else? Yeah. All right. Adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Sometimes just